yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think we decided to come back because of where we find ourselves. Just for reference sake, the day today is like September 30th.
Yeah.
Uh, Yesterday, you and I were on a call and we found out about Nasrallah's death.
Yeah.
And it's an important time for your voice actually to be heard, and a lot of voices, not to put you on a pedestal, but
Okay.
I think you have some. I think just take it away.
Yeah, I have a lot of feelings about it. Um, I mean, I'm sad first of all, and most of all, like I don't know. He was such an important person. He is such an important person. Um, to give context, he's the Secretary General of Hezbollah, the Islamic Resistance in Lebanon. And yesterday, it was confirmed by the resistance that he had been martyred. Um, he became the leader after the martyrdom of the previous leader um, in, I think, 97 or so. And he was the reason that he's so important and so important to me, but I think the reason that, I mean, he's important to everyone because of this. He he led the defeat of Israel in 2006. Um, in 2006, they when they invaded Lebanon, they claimed to have assassinated him. 3 days later, he came out and he gave this speech. There had been this Israeli warship in the Mediterranean that was targeting Beirut, bombing Beirut the whole time. And in his speech, he told everyone to like turn and look, and the warship was on fire. And that was such a big moment. I was only in grade 5. I was very young, but up until that point, there was a lot of like I'd known about this for a while, like since I was 5, and the feeling that I had about who Israel was and what they were was that they were this unstoppable evil. And watching that warship on fire when I came home from school, just like on TV, watching it burn, and seeing that it was by his hand and by the hands of this resistance group, this small entity in comparison to a a massive army, massive technological, military, like everything, backed by a global superpower, the only superpower, the United States. And not only that, but 33 days after they invaded Lebanon, the Israelis were sent home. They withdrew, and it was humiliating. And that was also like another big moment, watching these fucking dirty children running home after 33 days of getting back. So many losses. And it was seeing that this is not this entity as vicious and vile and as horrible as the crimes that they commit are. It was seeing that they are not impenetrable. They can be defeated, and they were defeated. And Lebanon is known as Israel's Vietnam because the way that it was humiliating for the United States to lose in Vietnam, it was as humiliating for them to lose in Lebanon.
And I think where we find ourselves right now, what's important is we came back to sort of change the narrative
Yeah.
and speak to the power of the resistance. So
Yeah.
before we really get into it, I think you should just tell everyone how you end up in the space you are in now,
Yeah.
why this particular issue is so important to you. I see like a lot of the time, like we talk and like people want you to talk about other things.
Yeah.
But why is Palestine so important to Toira?
Um well, I learned about this when I was 5. in 2000, it was watching Muhammad Adura being shot and murdered by the IDF in the arms of his father on the second day of the Second Intifada, and it's the anniversary of that today. It's been 24 years since he was shot and murdered, and that was I was only 5, but I was watching it. I was watching it on TV with my parents, and my parents have always been political. My dad specifically, and I was so young. I didn't know what Palestine was. I had no idea what a nation state was or what the lack thereof would do, and I didn't understand resistance. I didn't know what Hamas was, but on a very simple, basic model level, like watching a child get murdered and not being safe in the arms of his father, I didn't need to understand anything beyond that. Like it was simple enough. And I think even for a 5-year-old, evil it's understood. It's very basic. And I don't think that I felt like any kind of relational like I had no relational understanding of it. It wasn't like, oh, this could happen to me, or I didn't understand how far it was away from me either. It was just very simply like, this is wrong, this is not okay. And yeah, when I was 5, like it really pulled me in. And my dad's always been a political person, so we were going to marches and protests and meetings, and he taught me this poem that I memorized. I was 5, obviously I couldn't read it, and it's called "We May Lose Our Daily Bread," and the last few lines, it's like, you may burn my books and poems, feed my flesh to the dogs, spread a web of terror over the roofs of my village, by the enemy of light, until the last pulse in my veins, I shall resist. And I don't know, I think sometimes it was maybe a hectic thing to teach a child.
Yeah, you're 5.
Yeah. But I don't know, I felt it. Like I remember feeling like so angry all the time, and feeling like I needed to do everything that I could for the sake of this 11-year-old boy. There's that picture of me.
Yeah, tell me about the picture.
Yeah, I was I was at some protest. I don't even know what, but I was with like a bunch of kids, and it's me with my fist in the air and a sign that says Muhammad Adura lives on. I don't know if I suppose I have some faith in the synchronicity of that. The continuation of that.
Do you think that like this particular moment with Nasrallah's assassination is a turning point?
Yeah, I do think so. I think on the one hand we've lost a lot of leaders. A lot of our leaders have been assassinated through the years, but he was so big. He was so unstoppable. He was known as the master of the resistance. Not only that, but like he's known as like the Arab Vladimir Lenin, because he was so strategic and so thoughtful about everything that he did. And watching what he was capable of in 2006, it made you trust this man. He would give these speeches, and people tuned in. Israelis even tuned in because they needed to know what was coming, because you could trust that if he said that worship was on fire, it was on fire.
Tell me what happened in 2006.
The Israelis they invaded Beirut. Well, they invaded Lebanon. They got all the way to Beirut, but they only lasted 33 days. The resistance was so good. It was so impressive. The way that the tactics that they used, the military strategy that they used to defeat them. The south of Lebanon, it's literally like an uphill battle, Nasrallah sitting there on the mountain on some, we have the high ground, Anakin.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, they were able to sort of like create this path almost for the Israelis to invade into, because it's like this mountainous region, so they had the cover of the mountains. They could control where the Israelis were going. They used like landmines and anti-tank missiles so that they were going into the specific path where they had established positions, and they could target them.
Why are the imperialists so bad at war?
Because they're supremacists at the end of the day. This whole entity relies on a stupid, irrational idea that they are better than everyone, and because of that, it on a very like simple military sort of level, you have to know your enemy. And if you can't give your enemy any credit, if you can't understand who they truly are, if you don't know who you're fighting, then you can't fight them. And 2006 proved that. And there've been so many other factors that also prove that. So yeah, like supremacy, ultimately it's a dumb idea. And yeah,
what does it stem from though? Is like the US and Israel, like particularly have more, let's say, like technological reinforcement and like, I don't want to say manpower, but like arms, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense as to why they are so trash. Like I think about, and the narrative has always been like they are on offense, but
yeah,
and they are on the offense, but they still take L's. Like
yeah,
the US took an L on Afghanistan as well.
yeah.
Why do we not hear about this?
I mean, the media propaganda, even now with the martyrdom of Nasrallah, it's Biden put out this statement that it was a measure of justice or some bullshit. They're proud of it. They're proud of the Patriot attacks, which was a terrorist attack. They're proud of the fact that they can only ever use brute force, that they have no strategy. And yeah, they have superiority. They have military superiority and technical superiority, intelligence superiority, but they don't have the strategy. They've never won ever. Like they lost in Vietnam, and they haven't learned from that. They haven't learned from going up against a small, dedicated, committed group of people. Like the Vietnamese, they had this saying that we will not.
How did they lose against Vietnam?
Yeah, they used to have this saying that you will get tired of killing us, but we won't get tired of dying. And that's the essence of guerrilla warfare and guerrilla resistance, is that you rely on your enemies, their fatigue. At some point, they're not going to be able to withstand, but people who have been occupied, who have been subjugated, what they know and what they understand best is patience and perseverance. And this entity and this empire, they don't know about that, because they rely so heavily on brute force and like this physical strength. They don't have to rely on strategy and about being smarter. Because like I don't know, this is kind of, maybe it's a silly analogy, but if you think about like being brown in the workplace, for example, you have to work 10 times harder to get half the recognition, because you don't have that network. You don't have, you come in there with your Kham accent, can't roll your R, and so, you can't go out to the client meetings or whatever. So you have to work 10 times harder and prove yourself all the time, consistently, but it makes you better.
So they essentially don't have any hustle in them.
Yeah.
Where do you see things going? Like Lebanon, Afghanistan is one example. Vietnam is one example. Lebanon 06 is another example. And I think where do we go from here? What do you want people to realize in regards to the resistance?
Number one, I think that victory is certain, something that Nasrallah would repeat over and over again, and something that most resistance leaders have said, that this is this battle will end, this entity will fall. And I want people to have hope in that, because like a lot of the support that's come over the last 12 months for Palestine and for Lebanon now most recently, it's come from watching devastation and destruction, and it's not necessarily it doesn't necessarily come with the hope that it will be defeated. But I think like the first step of resistance is knowing that you will win, and believing wholeheartedly that you will win. If it's from a spiritual perspective, a religious perspective, just looking at the basic facts of the matter, from a military perspective, a technical perspective, whatever it is, this entity will fall. Like, we know it will fall, and I think we need to focus on that, and we need to ramp up our support, and move away from the constant devastation and horror, because I really feel like a big part of what this entity does is subject everyone to psychological warfare, and it's largely because the mainstream media is only, if they ever cover what's going on, they're covering the horrors of what's happening. And your Instagram feed and TikTok and like every social media platform is filled with the devastation. The resistance groups, they are banned from social media. You don't see their wins. Anytime you show a video of like a young child in sloffies, well, not, I don't mean a young child, like a 19-year-old, yeah, in sloffies firing a rocket launcher at a Makava tank, or running up to a tank and putting a grenade on it. Like, you don't get to watch that stuff on Instagram. You only get to watch buildings collapsing. And that psychological warfare, it puts you in the state of constant fear and constant just this panic all the time. But I think that if you knew who Nasrallah was, and if you're mourning Nasrallah right now, then you were lucky enough to see how weak this entity was. You were lucky enough to watch Israeli warships on fire and watch them run home to their mommy, and that gives you the hope and the faith in this resistance. And that's what we need to have now, and we have to work towards that and see the obligation that comes with the love of this cause.
There's the impact of that is also a eventual defeating of the psyche, where if we don't see our wins, we eventually feel worthless and feel there's no need to partake in resistance.
And I mean, I'm not even giving this terrorist narrative any. I'm not even like addressing it, because I think it's so stupid. And I mean, we've been called terrorists like for how long now? It's kind of funny, because before it was South Africa, the ANC, the PLO, Fidel Castro, Muammar Gaddafi. We used to be the Soviet-backed axis of evil, you know? And now it's Iran-backed axis of evil, which is just, like, we know this game already. Everyone, at this point, everyone in the third world, everyone in these, developing economies, whatever the politically correct term for it is, anyone can attest to what this empire has done, and how they have subjugated, how they've intervened, how they've overthrown their governments, how they have assassinated our leaders, how they have destroyed the hope within our people. And everyone's hurtful now. Everyone's tired. But that exhaustion mustn't force you into a sleep. It must now energize you and awaken you and push you towards action. And I know it is exhausting, it is frustrating, because since I was a child, since I was 5, I've been watching this bullshit. I've been watching this unfold. Not one year of your life goes by where you aren't watching a war crime, you aren't watching just atrocity
Injustice,
after
yeah.
atrocity. Yeah. But I mean, like, I think I told you about this yesterday, but when I was 5, and I remember like saying that little poem, and I was saying it like at a meeting or something. It was like in a school, and there was this Palestinian man. He was kind of old, and I love that man. He was from Gaza, and he was standing next to my dad, and I got so excited when I was on the stage doing my little poem, and I was so excited to just be finished with the poem so I could run up to him and hug him. And once I was done, I just ran towards him. I remember my dad telling me like, slow down. And I ran up to him, and he gave me this Palestinian scarf and this pin. And you asked me yesterday, like, what was it about that was so impactful to me? And it was that, like, he didn't treat me like I was a child. He treated me with like a lot of respect and dignity, and that really stuck with me for the longest time, because it felt like it just felt like he saw some kind of like potential or capacity, and he really like he respected that. And I remember like him talking to me as if I was an adult, not using childish words.
Yeah. There's a character in People from Palestine that's non-existent to the rest of the world, and I think that we need to speak to like I told you a couple of weeks ago that people in Palestine might be the last people actually free.
Yeah. Because it's maybe it's not physical freedom, but physically you are occupied, you are besieged, you are bombarded, you are arrested and detained, but mentally their minds are not colonized. Not an inch of their minds are colonized. And the rest of us, we cry for the death of a drug addicted celebrity, we cry for an episode of Game of Thrones, and like a lot of people aren't mourning Nasrallah because they never knew.
Yeah.
And that's colonialism. Like, your mind is being colonized. You don't get to know about the truth of the resistance and the brilliance of the resistance. And I remember, like, especially in the beginning when everything was so dire and there was just so much destruction, and the destruction was something that nobody is used to. And even after knowing what this enemy is for so long, I was surprised to see what they were capable of. But I was so impressed with the resistance. I was so impressed with their capabilities. Like, they are so smart that they genuinely they are the most
even the
impressive
guerrilla
people.
warfare tactics currently in play are brilliant.
It's brilliant. I mean, Yemen is still blockaded by the Saudis. They are still besieged, and yet they are firing rockets at Tel Aviv, the capital of this entity. They are still capable of doing that. You have Iraq, who was bombed for I don't even know how many years, and now they're destroying US bases. They're firing into the occupied territories. Same with Syria. And Gaza has been decimated. Not an inch of Gaza has not been destroyed. And on the same day that the Israelis announced that they've destroyed every single battalion in Rafah, they have to send evacuation helicopters to come save their soldiers that were targeted by Hamas. And I don't even know how many times they've said that they have to reoccupy and go into Gaza City again after they've claimed that they've destroyed every battalion there. They can't hold an inch of Gaza. They can talk about building fucking settlements and these Israeli dogs being able to enjoy the Mediterranean. They will never hold an inch of this territory. They will never survive a day in Lebanon. Maybe they'll do a ground invasion. Maybe they will. But they won't last there. It will be their end.
I think we just the intentionality of this. Let's call it a podcast. I think, I know our intention is to flip the narrative, and we worked with the series title, "Victory is Certain,"
Yeah, victory is certain.
and that's going to be the intention for the next for however long it takes.
Yeah.
And if this is the small part that we can play, and I think that the message should be that, like, we all can do something. This just happens to be one of our skills that we can contribute.
Yeah, and I know, like, you're watching all this stuff and you're feeling like, I can't do anything, I'm so helpless. But that in and of itself is allowing them to win. You mustn't think like that. You mustn't think that because I'm not in the occupied territories, or I'm not on the front lines firing at them, that you are helpless. That's not what it is. The first step to overcoming this entity is to stop them, prevent them from having any control over your mind. I mean, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, he said the greatest weapon in the hands of your enemy is the minds of the greatest weapon in the hands of your something like that.
Yeah.
It's the mind, you know. And psychological warfare, it's a thing, you know. It's like it's like a literal unit in the US Army for psychological operations. And I think one of the biggest ones is pushing people into the state of like selfishness and becoming so consumed with self. And that's a whole other discussion, just the levels that we've allowed ourselves to become so completely occupied with yourself. But I just like, one thing that I want to say is, when it comes to this cause, there's no gain in it, you know. I've been devastated since I was 5, and moeilijk and angry and filled with dread and anxiety since I was 5, unfortunately. But there's nothing like the love of this cause. Hassan Kanafani said that everything in this life can be robbed and stolen from you, except one thing: the love that emanates from a human being to the solid commitment of a cause. And I 100% believe that there's nothing like it. There's nothing like the love of this cause. And you may not gain anything, but the selflessness that it takes to fight for people that you've never met, for a land that you may never go to, but it's against a very simple evil, a very like obvious evil. And Salahuddin, when he was conquering Jerusalem and taking it back after the Christian Crusaders had massacred the Muslims 20 years prior, and he had promised that he would take Jerusalem back. And when he was at the gates of Jerusalem, he was asked, "Why do you fight so vehemently for this land?" And he said, "It's not a battle for land, it's a battle of consciousness. And we have to win that battle of consciousness before we get that land." And I think, that's the important part.
It is the important part. And there are a lot more elements we will get into.
Yeah.
But I think let's go from there.
Yeah.
Just leave that message there.